Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel and welcome to another beautiful day here in Central Florida. We couldn't have picked a better day to hang out and chat about this, so I'm glad that you joined me. Today we're talking about parking at the Walt Disney World theme parks. So we're going to talk about everything that you want and need to know. I'm also going to share some of my tips and tricks on how to make driving to the theme parks as smooth a process as it possibly can be. Now we're sitting here today because of Kristen. She left a comment on one of our previous videos and it was a great question she asked, and so that's why we're having this conversation today. But before we really jump into things, I want to be absolutely clear. I've said this before and I'm going to say it again. We're not here to change minds. I'm just here to share some of my opinions and thoughts based on my experience. If you're dead set on doing one thing or another, that's not a big deal. You do you. And I'm still going to tell you the good, the bad, and the ugly, and just prepare yourself. There's a lot of it in this conversation. With that said, I want to start off by giving my personal thoughts on driving to the Walt Disney World theme parks. Now keep in mind, I've been coming to Disney World for a number of years. I always stay on property, so I'm usually taking Disney transportation, but I recently moved down here and I have been to the parks too many times to count recently, and that means I've had to drive to all 4 of the theme parks, including Disney Springs and Typhoon Lagoon. So I get what it means to take Disney transportation, I get what it means to drive, and comparing the two, I have to say, I would take Disney transportation any day over driving to the theme parks. There are 2 main reasons for this, and we're going to get into more detail about them later in this discussion, but the first is just how long it takes to get from your car to the theme park, not necessarily based on time, but based on effort. And this is especially true the reverse way around, so getting from the theme park back to your car. And the second thing is the overall attitude of people in the parking lot. Now I know that this is going to sound like a little bit of a crazy one, and like I said, we'll get more into it as we discuss this further, but it can suck the magic right out of your day before you've even started. And these 2 things, every time I drive to the theme parks, these 2 things come up every single time without question. It doesn't matter the time of day, it doesn't matter where I'm going, these 2 things are always there. But of course, that's just my opinion. Let's get into some of the nuts and bolts and some of the facts. So, the basics. The parking lots at Walt Disney World theme parks open up 1 hour prior to early theme park entry. So if early theme park entry starts at 7:30, the parking lots will be open at 6:30. And this isn't for anyone in particular. They do just open up to anyone who decides that they're going to park at that theme park for the day. Now, like I said in our previous discussions that I will link in the description down below, it's still important to keep in mind, even though you're going to be driving your vehicle, that you're going to still have to get there early. I know that there are a lot of people who want to try and save time by driving, and I don't think that that's necessarily going to get you what you want. Again, I go into this in great detail in that video linked down below, so go check that out if you want to hear me expand on this particular topic. But the long and short of it is that you're still going to want to get there as early as you can. Currently, parking at the theme parks starts at $25 per day for a standard vehicle in standard parking. But if you're staying at a Walt Disney World Resort hotel, or if you're an annual pass holder, parking is free. There are also parking upgrades. So if you are looking for preferred parking, being able to park a little bit closer to the entrance of the theme park, that's going to cost you anywhere from $45 to $50. And if you do qualify for free standard parking, all you have to do is pay the difference. So that's an option for those of you who are looking to get a little bit closer but not have to pay the full price. So you've gone through the toll plaza, you've parked your car, now it's time to make your way to the theme park. Chances are, if you've been to Disney before, if you've driven before, you're thinking about the trams. Now Disney offers trams that'll take you from various points throughout the parking lot to the front of the theme park. So just a short walk from the gates, very comparable to where the Disney buses will drop you off. But it's important to keep in mind that trams aren't running everywhere. So currently there are trams at Magic Kingdom and there are trams at Animal Kingdom, but they have yet to return at Epcot or Hollywood Studios. So this means that if you're going to be parking at Epcot, you're going to be parking at Hollywood Studios, you're definitely going to have to be doing some walking. And that's pretty much common knowledge right now. I mean, it may have slipped past some people, and that's totally fine. That's why we're having this conversation. But one thing I don't hear a lot of people talking about is when exactly those trams start running. Now, I wasn't able to find anything definitive on this when it comes to the Disney website or other websites out there that I feel provide reliable information. So this next piece of information that I'm about to share is based 100% on my personal experience and isn't really based in any specific policy or anything like that. But trams don't start running first thing in the morning. They only start running later once the parking lot is more full. So if you're going to be going to the parks, you're going to be parking so that you can participate in early theme park entry first thing in the morning, there's a good chance that you're still going to have to walk a significant distance without having the use of a tram. How exactly this will impact your experience depends on what park you're at. Now, in my personal experience, I don't tend to have a problem at Epcot, especially first thing in the morning, just because there's like a little side entrance where you can kind of get to the gates, get to security, I should say, and then to the gates fairly easily. But at other theme parks, this can be a pain. I've been recently talking about my experience at Animal Kingdom, how they're like parking from a weird backside of the parking lot and then moving forward on some mornings, and that can mean long walks even before the trams start running first thing in the morning. I've had similar problems at Hollywood Studios just because the way that the park is at the entrance of the park. Sometimes even first thing in the morning you're parked like way over on the end and then you have to make the long trek across the parking lot. It's not as big of a deal though as Animal Kingdom, at least in my experience, and it's nothing compared to Magic Kingdom, which honestly is in a league all its own. Magic Kingdom is terrible to park at least in my opinion. Again, we'll get more into that a little bit later. Another thing to keep in mind too, especially if you're planning on arriving at the parks first thing in the morning, is that those trams aren't going to drop you off at the nearest parking lots. So you might not have access to a tram, even if they are running at a particular park. Magic Kingdom is a great example of this. Even though there are trams running at Magic Kingdom, they're not going to take you to those parking lots that are right behind handicapped or priority parking. They're only going to take you to the ones that are farther back. This means you have one of two choices. You can choose to just walk to your car, and that's going to be quite a bit of walking, or you can get on the tram, bypass your car completely, and have to walk back, which depending on where exactly you parked may be a problem in and of itself. So just be aware that especially if you're trying to take advantage of those early theme park hours, that early theme park entry, this might be something that you could find yourself running into. Okay, with the basics out of the way, let's talk a little bit more about the things you might not know about parking unless you've done it before. So these are based on my personal experience and are little tips and tricks. First, and honestly, this is one of my favorite pieces of advice, the toll booths. You can pay at the toll booth on either side. When you drive through the toll booths, we tend to think that they're going to take payment, whether that's actual payment or whether you're just showing your annual pass or whatever it is on the driver's side. But Walt Disney World has lanes open for you to pay on the driver's side and on the passenger side. And generally speaking, people tend to go toward the driver's side, so the passenger side lines can be a little bit shorter. This isn't always the case, but it can be. And so whenever possible, I like to try and make my way over to those passenger side lines, and I find that it usually moves pretty quickly. Now, once you get through the toll plaza, you're going to start following the road, and there's going to be a point where there's a fork in the road. One way is going to go toward standard parking, the other way is going to go toward preferred and handicap. Sometimes these signs can be small or even hard to read. Sometimes cast members are standing in front of them. Generally speaking, cast members are going to be directing you to which direction you need to go, but every once in a while, cast members aren't 100%, and so they might take a second, they might take a breath, take a drink of water or something, and they're not going to be directing you. So take a second, slow down, and really pay attention to where you're going. Make sure you're going the right way. Paying attention to cast members is vital, and it's really important that you keep slowing down. Make sure that you take your time, because it can be really dangerous in these parking lots. There are kids running around. There are parents trying to get themselves situated before they start the trek to the front of the park. So keep your eyes open, pay attention to those cast members, and they'll direct you into the spot that you need to park in. As you make your way out of the parking lot, another thing you want to be aware of is where you parked. And it's important to keep in mind that not all parking lots are marked in the same way. way. So for example, at Magic Kingdom, the rows are marked kind of all the way through. So if you're in row 407, it's going to have marks that say 407 all the way down the row. This is not the case for all parking lots. Some places like Animal Kingdom will only be marked at the end of the row, or there may be signs that say you're in, Mickey 307 over at Hollywood Studios. But it's important to be aware of where you parked before you make your way through the parking lot and to the front of the park. I recommend taking photographs. I know that a lot of people will say like, oh, that's excessive, I'll just remember. But I assure you it's much easier to take a photograph than it is to remember exactly where you parked at the end of the day. However, if you are against taking photos, my recommendation is to walk your way all the way down to the end of the row. This becomes necessary at places like Epcot, Hollywood Studios, and Animal Kingdom. Walk your way all the way down to the end of the row to see where exactly you parked before you walk into the theme park. Speaking of getting back to the car, this can be the worst experience when it comes to parking at Walt Disney World theme parks. At the beginning of the day, it might not seem like that big of a deal, but think about what going to the theme parks means. You've already woke up early, you've parked the car, you've made the trek to the front of the park, and then you're spending all of that time outside in the heat, kind of exploring around and having a great day. All the while, the cars and the asphalt in the parking lot is soaking up that sun, just like you and your family are. And that's one of the factors that makes that return trip to the car the worst thing about parking at the Walt Disney World theme parks. You're already hot, and now you're walking through a parking lot which can easily be 10 degrees warmer than it is in the parks, and the cars around you are radiating heat. It honestly is just the worst experience. And this is true whether you're doing this midday or if you're doing it after the sun has gone down, which is something that I've experienced myself as well. It's still like 10 degrees hotter. It's still really, really difficult to walk yourself back to your car. And in fact, a piece of advice that I give people all of the time, and I take myself, is leave the theme parks before you are hot, before you've arrived at that point where you feel like you can't take anymore, because you still have quite a trek back to your car. Another great piece of advice that I've talked about before is to actually make sure that you're getting that cold drink or whatever it is before you leave the theme park. I know there are a lot of people out there who don't like to make a purchase right before they leave, but it can be that hot that you really need something to keep you cool for that last part of your day. Okay, so we've covered the basics, we've covered the tips and tricks. Now I want to revisit the whole idea of Magic Kingdom's parking situation being the worst. For those of you who aren't already familiar, if you're going to visit Magic Kingdom and you're going to park your own car, you can't park at Magic Kingdom like you can park at Epcot or Hollywood Studios or Animal Kingdom. The lot is actually 1.5 miles away, and that's via ferry boat. And that means getting on the ferry boat, getting on the monorail, or making the walk through Polynesian, through Grand Floridian, and all the way along the water toward Magic Kingdom, which is a great walk, but it's quite the walk. And what this means, even in best case scenario, that between the time it takes you to park and get into Magic Kingdom, there's probably going to be a stretch of about 45 minutes. Like I said, best case scenario. And that's quite the stretch of time. Of course, all the things we said about the other parking lots apply to Magic Kingdom as well. You know, it's hot. The trams don't necessarily run to the first parking spaces, so you might find yourself walking regardless. But one thing that I definitely want to make note of, especially if you're thinking about driving and you could be taking Disney transportation, is how difficult it can be to get back to the transportation and ticket center and ultimately your car at the end of the night. If you think the lines are long for Disney transportation, let me tell you, you have not seen anything like the line for the ferry to get back to the transportation and ticket center at the end of the night. It can be crazy, and I'll be honest with you, I almost always walk back to the transportation and ticket center and then ultimately to my car versus taking one of these modes of transportation, which isn't a big deal if you're kind of going at the end of the day and you're only there for a couple hours. But if you're going to be doing the entire day or doing the morning, kind of relaxing in the afternoon and doing the evening, that is quite the trek. And I'm just one woman. I'm not trying to do this with kids. And honestly, when it comes to parking your car at a Disney theme park, while I wouldn't choose to park my car at any of them, I would absolutely not be parking at Magic Kingdom if I didn't have to. And even as someone who lives here and is going to the theme parks all the time during the summertime, it's a big turnoff for me when it comes to going to Magic Kingdom. Like, I will skip Magic Kingdom on a hot day because getting there is such a pain in the behind. But again, you do you. Make the decisions you want to make and let us know how you make out. We would love to hear about it. But the last thing I want to talk about before we wrap up today's conversation is the general attitude of people who are parking at the theme parks. I mentioned this at the very beginning, and I said that it's like the thing that sucks the Disney magic out of parking at the theme parks for me. I know that this isn't going to be the most magical thing to say, so just be forewarned, but I have never seen so many people so grumpy and complaining so much as the people who are parking at the theme parks, especially first thing in the morning. Honestly, I found it quite upsetting on numerous occasions, just the way that people are talking to their families or just the general outlook of some people. Don't get me wrong, I'm not the kind of person who needs everything to be fluffy and wonderful, but I have heard numerous conversations where people are just bashing Disney, bashing their family, bashing their family's choice to come to Disney or to drive to Disney. And if that's something that's gonna bother you, I think it's really important to keep that in mind, especially if parking at the theme parks is not your only option. Look, I don't say any of this lightly, and I wouldn't bring it up if it wasn't what I was experiencing firsthand. And quite frankly, I hope that I'm wrong here. Like, I hope that during your trip, you don't experience any of this and you don't encounter any of this. Like, that's my hope. But it's still my experience, so that's why I'm sharing it with you, and that's why I'm telling you how it is, because that's what we do here. We tell it how it is. But yeah, with that, I think we've covered basically everything about parking at the theme parks. We've been going on for quite some time, and I know it's a long one, but there's a lot to say. Of course, I would love to know your thoughts. I would love to know your tips and tricks. Share them in the comments down below, along with your questions. Let us know, is there anything else you want to know more about? We'd be happy to sit down and chat with you about it. But until then, thanks for watching. Like, subscribe if you haven't already. We've got more fun like this to come, and we'll see you in the next one. Bye.